All right, this is a 99 Mazda Miata. Paid $1,100 for it as it stands now. And interestingly enough, this one came from a scrap yard. So the customer bought it, and with the jump starter got it running, then actually drove it 100 miles back to his house. Not a bad deal. Didn't have to pay to ship it. And here's the cool thing. All this interior stuff is missing, but the junkyard gave it to them. Said, you're buying the car, pick out what you want from the other Miatas. So the interior is actually in decent shape. Now this is a classic 5-speed standard transmission, fun to drive, and really, for a Mazda, it's only got 128,000 miles on it, and that's basically nothing. I've seen it with 228,000 miles. But check under the hood, it's even still got the prop rod. A lot of them won't have the prop rod. All right, this little bitty engine puts out 140 horsepower. Reliable engine, can last a long time. Aside from a little valve rolling, that's normal on these. It does not sound bad. No rod knocking, that little bit of rattling, that's normal in one of these Mazdas with 120,000 miles. Nothing to worry about. And check this old baby out. The AC still blows cold. Now the Mazda Miata is the only sports car, 2-seat roadster, that sold more than 1 million models. The only thing you really got to worry about is rot. We're going to check the frame. Got a little hammer here. As we come out from under, no rust on the wheel wells. And what do we have here? I thought this was a Mazda Miata, but it's got Honda wheels on it. Check it out. Left front is Honda, left rear is Honda, right rear is Honda, and right front is Honda. And they're very nice rims too. That's one advantage of buying something from a salvage yard. He said he wanted better rims. The guy says, take whatever you can find that fits, we don't care. 4 beautiful Honda rims. Kind of interesting. A Miata with Honda rims. Shows a little bit of novelty, something you're not going to see every day. Might make people's heads spin. They might look at it and see the H Honda and say, what kind of a Honda is that? Is that an S2000? Of course, it's not nearly as fast as an S2000. It doesn't sound like one either. But you might be able to fool a few people there. Now, these Miatas are pretty convenient cars. They still have a reasonable amount of trunk space in them for a rag top that goes up and down. They're not all that bad. And you can see, it sounds solid. It doesn't sound cheap and tinny like a lot of vehicles do. Now, the advantage of buying these dirt cheap like this is, hey, you want a rag car, clear coat over all the faded paint, or if you really want, it's a very small car. You could repaint this car easily. Think about it. It doesn't even have a top, convertible top, so you don't have to paint the top. That's kind of the hardest part of a car to paint because you're up in the air. These things are very easy to paint if you want to paint it, or like I say, you can turn it into a rat car like a lot of people do. You can pick and choose what you want to do. Now, this particular Miata is kind of symptomatic of a lot of things in our society. It was thrown away in a salvage yard. Hey, as far as I'm concerned, it's a pretty good, decent, basic car to start fiddling around with. You would be surprised at stuff that goes in the junkyard. People get rid of them because they don't run for some reason or not, or the paint's faded like this was, or, you know, it didn't even have wheels on it. But that doesn't mean that much with one of these Miatas. They are pretty much the Miata version of a Toyota Corolla, although they're convertibles. These things can basically run forever. There's so many aftermarket parts for them. They're cheap to either customize or just flat out repair. And really, even though this thing is a 99, it's still stylish because it is a 2-seat roadster. Their styles do not change all that much over time. Still a decent looking car. And I mean, if you wanted to put a hot paint job on it, it would really be sharp. So let's take it for a spin. Now, in typical Mazda fashion, starts right up. And as you can hear, it's still pretty smooth. It's not particularly vibrating. The shifter isn't shifting and shaking. It has no problems backing up a steep hill. Let's see what this thing can do. Still got a lot of those 140 horses. They're basically fun, sporty little cars. More miles per miles for this kind of money. And you can have fun going around in circles too. Ah, the circle of life. Now, so much for those naysayers that say, oh, the Mazda Miatas, they're girly cars, they don't have enough power. Hey, for the weight of these things, they have plenty of power. Yeah, they're not high end, they don't go a zillion miles an hour, but they're a lot of fun to drive. Plus, this is probably the easiest standard transmission in the world to learn how to drive. If you already have a driver's license, you say, but I don't know how to drive a standard, I guarantee you, take about 10 minutes and you'll be able to drive this thing all over the place. They're so smooth, hydraulic clutches, the shift is so easy to go, it is no problem learning on something like this. And after all, it's a classic rear wheel drive sports car. You can have a lot of fun with it. Now, the reason most cars are front wheel drive is because it's cheaper to make them that way, and they get a little bit better gas mileage. Got a little bit of engine in it, and it's a light body, so it gets phenomenal gas mileage. This thing still gets 29 miles a gallon on a highway. That much fun? Hey, you can't beat it. And yeah, it doesn't have the big giant tires that a lot of these guys are oogling for these days, but guess what? These little tires, they don't cost that much. You can get really good, reasonably priced tires for this thing if you drive it hard. And if you drive it hard, you'll find out you wear the rear ones out about 4 times faster than the front ones. Now, I have to say, I fell in love with the Mazda Miata Grand Touring that I road tested a few months ago, but that was $31,000. This was $1,100. You know, I think I'd have a lot more fun in an $1,100 one, to tell you the truth, because I'm a cheapskate. And if you wanted to have even more smiles with this, for about $2,000, you can get a supercharger. Throw that on this thing. Then it would really fly. Then it would be putting well over 220 horsepower out. But really 140 ponies on this old thing, it's still a lot of fun. It's not a race car, it's a fun car. And my customer who bought this for $1,100 in a junkyard of all places, I think he got a pretty good deal on this car. Because the body's all clean. Yeah, the clear coat's coming off and it needs the hood repainted. And the bumper repainted, but you expect that on a car that's that cheap. Now this here is rust, but it's just superficial rust. Somebody did a crappy Bondo job at one point in time. You can see the Bondo here. Yeah, I could have it all sanded down, have a body guy do it over. Or really, if you wanted, you just rip the fender off. Get an aftermarket fender, you can get them for 60, 70 bucks, and just repaint the whole thing. But I do have to say, the Honda wheels really set it off. Even I learned something today. The Honda wheels fit perfectly on a Mazda Miata. So if you're looking for some affordable fun, hey, don't poo-poo the Mazda Miata. They can be a lot of fun for a very little amount of money. A 95 Toyota Supra Turbo. These are the Supras that the collectors want. Now, when they first put the Supra with the 6-cylinder engine in it, it put out a whopping 110 horsepower with the straight 6 engine. And that was back in 1979. Now, this is a 1995. The stock ones put out 340 horsepower. They had a lot of horsepower for a little car like this. Now this one's been modified a little, as you can see. It's got a carbon fiber hood. It's still got the straight 6 engine, but it's got a blueprinted 3.4 liter engine. It doesn't have 2 turbos. It only has 1. You can see it's a rather large turbo. It's all heat wrapped for efficiencies. The guys that did this thing in Florida, they knew what they were doing. Because on a dyno, this thing puts out 1,250 horsepower. We're not talking about at the flywheel. We're talking about the drive wheels. 1,250 horsepower. But showing how well Toyota makes stuff, this still has the V160 gear track transmission that the original one came from, that only had 340 horsepower, and it hasn't broken yet with 1,250 horsepower on it. You want to talk about overbuilding? Toyota is known for that. Now, you might say, okay, well, they stopped making them. There's something wrong. There's nothing wrong with the cars. The problem was they weren't selling enough of them at the price point that they had. As anyone who knows about Toyota history, the owner, he was into racing. Racing doesn't make money. Selling cars makes money. And they didn't sell enough of them, so they stopped making them. And now, sadly, they came back with the Supra. But it has nothing to do with this car at all. It's a BMW Roadster, because Toyota did not want to spend the money to research and design and build one. And I guess they figured, well, what the heck? BMW makes straight six engines, so we'll have them make a sports car for us. Just like the little bitty Toyota sports car, the one that's really a Subaru. It's made in the Subaru factory by Subaru. It's not really a Toyota sports car at all, but Toyota didn't do it to do research and development. And they thought, oh heck, they already have that out there. They're cute looking. We'll put our badge on it. I'm against that stuff myself, but Toyota don't want to spend the money. They're making a fortune selling Corollas, Camrys, and their Lexus lines. They want to make money. They're not going to be making their own sports cars. It costs too much money. You never recoup the investment. Now, this particular Supra is a love of labor for the customer, and he'll never recoup his investment either because he's putting so much money into it. But it's his baby. He's really into it. He's retired military. He can do what he wants. Although his wife might disagree. He's been married to her over 40 years. Kind of like mine, you know. They rule the roost ultimately, but they let us have toys every once in a while. Now, you don't have to modify it to 1,250 horsepower to have fun. But of course, if you do, you're going to have a lot more fun and spend a lot more money. 100K here, there, a little bit more. It's not cheap to do it right. And this engine was done right by these dudes in Florida. Induction performance. But there's a story behind this great 3.4 engine that was put in it. He had gone to another place, I believe it was in Georgia, and they said they were putting the 3.0, build it all up. He gets it home. He drives it a little, it dies. He revs it up, makes it in his driveway. Thing doesn't work right. He ends up sending it to Florida to these other guys who knew what they were doing. And they said, they lied to you. It had a 3.0, not a 3.4. It didn't have reworked head on it at all. It was just a stock head. They had lied to him. You know, there's a lot of dishonest people out there these days. If you're serious about it, you got to do a lot of research, get some personal experience from guys who actually use them, see what they have. Most guys with a car like this are going to want to show it off. So if you're thinking about doing stuff like this, go to a guy who's already done it. Drive his, get his experience, then you can deal with the same people. So you don't have to make a mistake that he did that cost the money. You go to the good guys in the first place. People just think just because somebody says they can do something, it doesn't mean they can. Like we used to say in Texas, some people are all hat and no cattle. Now, needless to say, wheels, tires, brakes are all upgraded. These are 18-inch CCW, and check inside. Those stop ticks, brakes that are on there, man, those are gigantic calipers. If you have 1,250 horsepower pushing you down the road, you need brakes that can stop 1,250 horsepower. You gotta upgrade if you're gonna do something like that. Now, it's a regular Supra, body style. You can see, it would have a lot of room if you put the seat down, but this baby's got 150 shot nitrous oxide setup on it. Getting 1,250 horsepower is not an easy thing to do. To me, it's an amazing thing that this little bitty straight six engine can put out 1,250 horsepower and still hold itself together. Now, I do have to say, the stock ones with 340 horsepower back in the day, that was a lot of horsepower for a little car like this, right? I got a friend who's on Long Island. He got one of these things back in the day from Mr. Toyota. They had a drinking contest, I guess. When they were loaded, he asked my friend, "Hey, what car would you have?" He said, "I'd like a bi-turbo Supra." I said, "Why don't you buy one?" He says, "They cost too much money." So Mr. Toyota said, "Would you buy it if you could get it at our cost for building?" He said, "Sure." Well, this was done in a drunken stupor, and nothing else was thought about it for a while. But one day, he's sitting at his office on Long Island. He gets a phone call from the dock saying, "Hey, we don't know who you know, but there's this Toyota Supra waiting on the docks for you." So he got his bi-turbo dirt cheap. He still has it. And one time, he got caught doing about 135 miles an hour out in the country. They should have put him in jail, but he talked his way out of just doing 90. So even with only 340, they can go. This thing, it's total insanity. Well, you can hear this thing has a few horsepower just sitting here. And off we go. Now, as you can see, this vehicle can do insane things. Now, you don't have to go this far. You can have a lot of fun with one that has only 340 horsepower, but the very fact that it can do this with a 6-cylinder engine It's rather amazing when you think about it. That's why I always like straight six-cylinder engines. They're inherently balanced engines. So, if you have an inherently balanced engine, guess what? You can do insane things with it. If you have a slightly unbalanced engine, the faster it goes, the bigger the imbalance, and wham! That's why weak engines will blow up. You get an inherently strong design, if you keep pumping it up, it can take it because there's hardly any imbalance. And of course, this thing was perfectly balanced by the guys who built the engine in Florida. They knew what they were doing. You're going to mess around with things like this? You want to get that kind of horsepower? You need somebody who really knows what they're doing and isn't just all hat, no cattle, and talk the talk, but not walking the walk. These guys, they walk the walk to build something like this that can take. Truthfully, I am amazed that the 6-speed transmission can take all that horsepower. Again, we have Toyota overbuilding. They build them so strong, something that was designed for a 340 bi-turbo can now take 1,250 horsepower. And even with all that power, strangely enough, he can go from Clarksville to Nashville and back about 120 miles where he's going. And if he fills it up here in Clarksville, he's still got a quarter of a tank left when he gets back for 120 miles. That's not bad for this kind of insane horsepower. I do have to say, when I was driving a 2013 Shelby Cobra, it only had 667 horsepower, and the way I drove it, I got about 3 miles a gallon. I had to fill that thing up 3 times, and I only had it for 6 days. And I didn't even take it out of town. And yeah, you get better gas mileage on the highway, but this kind of horsepower, it still can get decent gas mileage if you're just going the speed limit a little bit further. It's a well-designed engine. And let's face it, for a 25-year-old car, look at it. It's unbelievably beautiful. It's pretty much a style that never goes out of style. They were perfectly balanced suspension-wise. They've got nice lines on them. Of course, this one's been modified, but it's modified on something that was pretty good to start out with. Although this one's gone a long way from the original 110 horsepower version, more than 10 times. If you can find one that's still in decent shape, that's stock, it's a collector's item too. Especially if whoever bought it the previous time realized that it was a great car, didn't put a ton of mileage on it. You have really high resale value if you got an original equipment one. They didn't make that many in the first place. A lot of them got wrapped around trees, so if you can find old barn find somewhere, or old man older than me who can't drive it anymore, might not be a bad idea to pick it up. A 96 Corvette. A lot of guys are looking for Corvettes. They think, oh, they're too expensive or they're all junk. Well, this one was recently picked up for only $7,000. There's still good deals out there. Mind you, it was from a 70-year-old man, so you're taking less of a risk than you are if you're buying it from a 25-year-old. Check it out. It's still got the original paint job on it. Some guys really take care of these things. And if you can find one like this, let me tell you, buy it. When you check the interior, it's all original. Yeah, there's a few scratches, a little pitting. That shows it's original. It's worth more money that way. You don't want it with all this aftermarket stuff. The seats are still in decent shape. Now these things are a lot tougher than you might think because the owner recently hit a deer here in Tennessee. He just bent stuff up. And then he decided, well, he's going to put some LED headlights in anyway, so he did that. But, hey, a solid car. Some of these modern cars, you hit a deer, you can say goodbye to the car. I even had a customer in Texas hit a deer with this big old 250 truck. All the cooling systems they got in the front, power steering, automatic transmission, you name it. All those coolers were destroyed. It did over $6,000 worth of damage, and that was a big old truck. It's one advantage of being lower and aerodynamic. Things can hit, but then they can slide right off. It didn't even ruin his windshield. Now, the one real fun thing about Corvettes are you can kind of mold them to your amount of money you want to spend. Yeah, you're not going to probably go and buy one. They only made 2 that year or 8 that year. They're going to cost a fortune. This is a collector's one. They made about 5,000 of these. They all got plenty of power. You don't have to go buy one that costs a small fortune. You can find plenty of them out there that are in excellent shape, a lot of fun to drive, and over time, this one certainly is going to appreciate in value with original paint job, original hood. Heck, it's even got the original wheels and they're still in excellent shape. Now, the main reason people buy these vehicles is because of the engine. It's an American V8. This particular one puts out around 340 horsepower. They have tons of power. They're fun to drive and they're classic rear wheel drive. So of course they're great for drifting, doing donuts. With their setup, they're kind of like really fun giant go-karts. Now some people, they don't like the crawling in and then crawling out. But that's part of the fun, and that's part of why they ride so well, because they're so low, which is what you want. Now, this being a 96, it's a lot of fun to drive, but it's more of a man's car. They ride like a go-kart too. If you remember the one I did on the new CA with a mid-engine car, that had the Magnetrack suspension, and when you put it on sport, it handles even tighter than this. But when you put it on the touring, it actually rode like an old Cadillac. It was very smooth. So, you know, they've got ways to get around this, but this is a serious driving car. If you're the type of person that wants to drive serious, you can have a lot of fun. But it's not a car that is a comfy long distance car. A lot of people think, oh, I'll get that, and then they don't like it. So if you want that, you're gonna have to get a newer one. You're not gonna get a classic. Now, the coolest thing about these Vettes are you can do whatever you want. This has the stock 4L50 transmission in it. Shifts perfectly fine. Do whatever you want to do. But if you want to upgrade, go ahead. Do whatever you want. If you're half insane, put a supercharger blower on it if you want. You can do whatever you want. Plenty fast enough the way it is. And for $7,000, you get one in this kind of shape, you can have an awful lot of fun. Now, yeah, it's an older car, but hey, it's got a new auto lock on it. That's kind of a crazy thing. It may be old, but it's still very stylish. And once you're in the seats, they really hold you in. They're comfortable, yet form-fitting. And this particular one, as you can see over the steering wheel, this baby's only got 92,000 miles on it. There's a ton of life left in this car. And of course, just listen to it. The Burbo and the Fury. If you really wonder why people drive these, this is why. And when you get into twisties, this car is really fun. With these wide tires and the suspension system, it just handles like a dream. It is not a sedan to piddle down the road in. It's to have a lot of fun in. Now after that ride, you can understand how they sold more than 1.5 million Corvettes. Now yes, when they're new, they're not cheap, but hey, you find one that an old man owned. Now he's got it straight piped, so it sounds better. But when he bought it, it had the stock exhaust on it. And that kind of proves if you're looking at one, if you can find one with the stock exhaust, say you want more noise. Doesn't matter. You're better off with the stock exhaust, knowing, they didn't drive it like a lunatic. They didn't push it to its limit. If you want to, take it off and straight pipe it. It's actually better to buy one that isn't straight pipe because odds are it's been driven more conservatively. Granted, there are 70-year-old men that drive like lunatics too, but your odds are in your favor if you buy it from an older person than if you buy it from somebody who's 20-something years old who's going to be ragging the heck out of it. Of course, being fiberglass, you don't have to worry about the rust factor. Most places, these things hold up quite well over the years, as long as they're not wrecked or just driven too hard. This one wasn't. You can drive it hard now. Not that many cars you can go out and buy a 96 that drive like this. There just aren't that many. They've been taken care of. This one is. And really, if you can find one like this with the original paint job still on it, hey, it's only going to appreciate in value if you don't wrap it around a tree. It's a fun car for a very small amount of money if you use your head and look at it from a logical standpoint. This particular one was found on Facebook. His father found it. He knows a lot about cars. His father owns a bunch of these. They got a good deal on a really nice car. Check out the LED headlights. He put them on since the deer whacked one of them. You can modify them to your heart's content. You can do little ones, big ones, whatever you want to do. They're a lot of fun, and it's not all that expensive unless you start getting into beefing up the engine, throwing superchargers on them. But as you saw in that ride, these things are pretty quick the way they're set up originally. If you want just a fun, fast car, you could leave it the way it is. It's not like it's some wimpy little V6 that you gotta push the heck out of it to get some power. It's already got plenty of power in it. Now, if you're totally insane, you can do like the Callaway Sledgehammer, and that C4 Corvette went 254 miles an hour. So that'll show you, you got a pretty solid base here that you can play with if you really want to go insane. But for $7,000, I can't think of much that you can have this much fun in. If you can find one in this kind of shape from an old man, even if you got tired of it, as long as you don't wrap it around a tree, you could probably make money selling it on to somebody else. You're certainly not going to lose any money. That sound, the sound is priceless. It's the sound of America. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.